Right, so ROSH CHODESH Iyar, and it's just a lot of things happening at the same time. We've got ROSH CHODESH Iyar, we've got Yom HaZikaron, which started half an hour ago or so, and we've got Yom Ha'aztmaut coming up. So it's just an interesting confluence of times of the year and times in our history. And we're on two journeys. I'm going to talk to you about two journeys that we're on. The one journey is a journey of healing, and the other is a journey of freedom. And it's interesting that we find ourselves right here at Yom HaZikaron, moving into Yom Ha'aztmaut tomorrow. It's because Yom HaZikaron is a journey of healing. That's what it's about. There's pain, there's loss, there's heartache, and Yom Ha'aztmaut is supposed to be a time where we feel our freedom. It'll be a little different this year. I don't think anybody's feeling abundant freedom right now. But still, that's what it stands for. The fact is, we're in a much better place from a freedom perspective than we were 80 or 90 or 100 years ago. We're in a much better place from a specific freedom than we were a year ago. The region is different. The world is different. We don't yet know where it's going and where it's going to land. But we know that the things we were pretty terrified of a year ago no longer terrify us. That's a big thing. That's a big change. We get used to it very quickly. But we had 150,000 rockets aimed at us a year ago, and they're gone. We had Iran sending missiles towards us twice, threatening our annihilation, and they kind of didn't scratch us. And we still got the issue with Hamas and the hostages and the tragedies and sadness there. So we're in this process, and we're on this journey, and we're going to talk about both these journeys. Firstly, we'll talk about the healing journey. Understanding that since this time last year, we've lost another over 300 soldiers. That's huge, and that is tragic. And each time you learn about one of them and you see a picture of one of them, it is just so sad in terms of the human talent, the souls, the minds, the personalities that we've lost. These are, as I said in a shir recently, these are 300 universes, not 300 individuals. And we've lost, since last Yom HaZikaron, more than 80 civilians. Since the beginning of the state, we're over 30,000 people who've given their lives for us to live the way we're living. And that's an understanding of the cost. And that's only part of the cost, but it's a serious part of the cost of this gift of Eretz Yisrael that we have. And having Yom HaZikaron before Yom Ha'aztmaut, as I mentioned in the video that we sent out a few hours ago, is something very special because it allows us to pause and consider the cost. If we don't consider the cost, we often don't appreciate the value. And it's too easy for us to get into taking for granted mode, to get into complaining mode. This isn't right, and that isn't right, and the cottage cheese is too expensive, and the yogurt isn't fresh, and all the different things we get upset about. And one understands it, but this just gives us a time to stop and get our perspective right. I remember I was in the middle of it was near the beginning of the war. There was an exhibition on at the art museum that we wanted to see, and we went along, and I got the dates wrong. It was my fault. But I was sure I was right, and that they got the dates wrong. Mm-hmm. And I started kicking up a bit of a fuss about how they could advertise dates which weren't going to be, and so on. And an elderly man came up to me, and a docent there, and he put his arm around me and said, "Look, just understand you're upset, but there are bigger things to be upset about. You want to be upset? There's lots to be upset about, but not this. This is too small to get upset about. Go downstairs, have a cup of coffee, and calm down." And Yom HaZikaron is a bit like that. It's just time to pause, have a cup of coffee, and realize, wow, what this country is worth, what it has cost, what it means to us. So many families bereaved, so many families dealing with wounded soldiers, so many families dealing with people who've become mentally disturbed as a result. There's just so much going on, and so much for us to be grateful for. And to pause before Yom Ha'aztmaut is, I don't know historically whose idea it was to put these 2 days exactly where they are, but it works out phenomenally well. And one has to notice that. So that journey from Yom HaZikaron to Yom Ha'aztmaut, that journey from sadness and loss to hope and freedom. And what that means is one of our journeys. And the time for healing, more than any time of the year, is Iyar. The month that we've started now is a month designed for healing. It's an idea that the Bnei Yissaschar brings. We often use the Bnei Yissaschar as a springboard for what we talk about. And he says, Chodesh Iyar hu nivchan u'menuseh b'chokhmat ha'refuah shehu mesugal. This is a proven thing already. We know that Iyar is the time for refuah, for healing, the time for curing. That's what the month of Iyar is. And he suggests a reason. What is it about Iyar that should have this capacity to be strong for healing? V'nireh li hatam dinishar ze b'skula b'chodesh hazeh d'hinei kol ha'chulshot v'ha'cholaim al pi harov ba'in min ha'ma'achalim she'enam lefi mezeg ha'adam. Most disease is the consequence of incorrect eating. It's food-related. And Iyar was the month that the Mon was created. It was the month that the Mon started. So for that month was the first time in history where there was no human food. There was no food created by any industry at all. We know how much better it is to have food that is not industrial, to have food that is homemade, food that is handmade, but to have food that is God-made, food that hasn't even gone through human hands, comes straight from the Rebbeinu Shem to the human being. That was a period of enormous good health. And he says a strange thing. He says, Nimtza b'chodesh hazeh nitrap'u kol ha'cholaim. It emerges that in this month, that month of Iyar after Yetziat Mitzrayim, was the time when all of these illnesses were healed. Now, where does the healing come from? I would understand if he says nobody got ill, because this was a time that there was no eating, we weren't eating all the junk food, and therefore nobody got ill. I get that, but why healing? What was there about Iyar that was healing? That we don't hear that the Mon was a healing capacity. It's just the Mon didn't have any of the negatives of other food. But something that I think we're beginning to understand a lot more nowadays than we perhaps have before, that when we say in Rafa'enu 3 times a day, Rafa'enu Hashem, heal us Hashem, and then what do we say after that? V'nei Rafeh. What's the V'nei Rafeh?
Let us be healed.
Let us be healed. Sure, you've just said heal us. So if he's going to heal us, we'll be healed. We don't say Chanenu mitchadeh b'nei v'askel, and then we will be chachamim. We don't say Slach lanu, and then we will be tzadikim. Why do we say Rafa'enu and then V'nei Rafeh? Because, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, because the human body is capable of healing itself. We just get in the way of that process. And what we ask for the Rebbeinu Shem to do is just Rafa'enu, give our bodies the capacity to heal themselves. We're not asking you to heal us. You've built a body, you've designed a body fully capable of healing itself. We've messed up. We're eating the wrong things. We're living the wrong lifestyle, and that gets in the way of the body's capacity to heal. So Rebbeinu Shem, just remove that damage that we've done to our body, Rafa'enu, so that V'nei Rafeh, so that we can heal ourselves. Because healing is something we have to do ourselves. Healing is not something somebody else can do for you. Can a therapist heal a person who's troubled? They can just facilitate their person healing themselves. And that understanding, we've become so used to people doing things for us, to be able to buy the solution, to be able to get the solution, solve my problem. No, we have to solve our own problems as individuals and as a nation. We have to heal our own illnesses as individuals and as a nation. Nobody can do that for us. All we ask Hashem for is Rafa'enu v'nei Rafeh, so that we can do that. So if in the month of Iyar, we were eating the right things, our bodies were able to do what they need to do. And not only did we not get ill during Iyar, but we actually recovered from prior illnesses. You can imagine coming out of Mitzrayim, they weren't the healthiest of human beings. But during the month of Iyar, they lived so purely, both from a spiritual perspective and a physical perspective, that their bodies were able to take on the capacity of healing. And then we're told, Lo nitna Torah ela lochlei Haman. That explains the Bnei Yissaschar, is why Iyar comes before Sivan. Because Iyar was the cleansing time, and interesting, it's a physical cleansing. And that enabled the Jewish people to be fit to receive the Torah. There had to be a physical healing and a spiritual healing, of course. to be able to accept the Torah. What is it about the man? It doesn't say the Torah was just given to the generation that came out of Egypt. The Torah could only be given to the generation who's knew Moshe Rabbeinu, whatever. The Torah could only be given to people who had a specific diet. What's the one going to do with the other? The Torah could only be given to people who ate them on. So the Bnei Yisachar deals with it in a physical dietary perspective of the purity of the food. But we can take that a little bit further. The Zohar says in Parshas Tetzaveh, Kad Yahav Kutshibrichu Oraisa Yisrael, when Hashem decided to give the Torah to Israel, At Imluhu Mehahu Nama Ilad, He gave them to eat from that special food, that special bread. Umigo Hahu Nama Havu Yadin Umistaklin Beraze Deoraita. And through eating that food, they were able to understand the deepest secrets of the Torah. They were able to see right into the Torah. So there's some connection. It's not just that was a generation that could get the Torah. It was the act of living on Mon that made receiving the Torah possible. If these were people who were living on any other food, they would not have been able to receive the Torah. What is it about the food? And I would suggest it's not really about the food. There is that element of the food, that it's not industrialized, it's not material, it's spiritual food. It's food made, it's spirit converted into matter. It's spirit converted into food. It's the purest food there's ever been and ever will be. That was what the mon is. But there's another dimension to it as well, and that is, whose food is it? Where does it come from? If you go to somebody's home and you have a dinner, you know that the food is provided by the host and hostess of that home. And they prepared it, they bought it, they did whatever they do. Whose table are you sitting at when you eat mon? Who's the chef? Who's the maitre d'? Who's providing it? What's the brand? Hashem, 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 Hashem. Hashem is the chef. Hashem is the maitre d'. Hashem is the host. You're sitting at Hashem's table. And that's what it means. You come to the table as a guest. This is not food that you've earned. This is not food that you've worked for and you've gone to the supermarket to buy. This is not food you chose. It's not food you selected. You're a guest. You're turning up at the restaurant, and it's one of these menus where there's no menu, where the chef tells you what you're going to eat. But it's a little bit better than that. The chef tells you what you're going to eat and says, and if you don't like it, that's fine. Just imagine whatever you want, and it'll taste like whatever you want it to taste, and that's fine. I recommend this, and if you want something else, it'll be something else. What kind of magic is that? So you have nothing to do with it. Where else do you have a situation where you have nothing to do with it? Not in the choice, not in the buying, not in the growing, not in the cooking, not in the presenting, nothing. It's all from Hashem. So to have a generation who eats 2 or 3 meals a day, however many they ate, at Hashem's table, that Hashem is your host, you're eating food provided by Him, that's a completely different perspective. It's a completely different feeling of the way you're operating. So if eating is one of the most physical things we do, even the most physical thing we do, they did in a spiritual way, in a way that is as spiritual as when we're literally sitting at Hashem's table. And that means my mind is not occupied with earning a living. That means I have no worry about earning a living. I'm not even worrying about what are we going to have for dinner tomorrow. All that worry is taken away. It's like you're living in a 5-star hotel where everything is provided, but it's not industrialized. It's just pure. You've got no decisions to make. You've got nothing to worry about. Everything is taken care of. It's like one of these Pesach programs. You go, everything's taken care of. You can just, all you have to do is sleep and eat. There's nothing else that you have to do. You don't have to make any choices or decisions. It's all done for you. And they're on this permanent Pesach program. I said to somebody over Pesach, the first Pesach program was Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Jews left Egypt on a Pesach program. It extended. They liked it so much that they stayed on it for 40 years. But it was like that. You're on a program. You've got nothing to worry about. But much deeper than that, you're so free to be able to apply your mind and your thought and your feeling to other things because you don't have to worry about anything physical at all. That's what makes that generation unique and special. Now, what's interesting is that it's a little bit like we have that simulated in the case of the Kohanim, and we touched it in a Matmon recently, where the Kohanim, the Rambam comments in Hilchus Trumas, that asur lahen to the Kohanim sheyachtefu trumoto ma'asrot va'afilu lish'on chelkan befihen asur. Although the truma the tithe that belongs to the Kohen belongs to the Kohen is entitled to it, no specific Kohen is entitled to a specific tithe. And therefore the Kohen is not entitled to go to a Yisrael and say, you've just harvested your field, please think of me when you're giving truma. Can I be on your list of recipients? He's not allowed to do that, and he's certainly not allowed to grab it. It's why? Ela notlim bechavod. You've got to receive the truma with a lot of honor and dignity. If you're on the Pesach program, don't go to the table and serve yourself at the buffet. Wait for the host to come around and serve you. I realize you might go hungry. Mm-hmm. But that's what Bekoved means. Bekoved means, that's exactly, don't grab it, Kohen. So now if we apply that to ourselves, I know buffets are convenient and all that, don't go and grab the Kohen. That's not Koved. Koved is wait for the food to be brought to you. And the Mon was like that. The Rebbeinu Hashem brings the fruit to them. They didn't have to go out and earn it and find it in any way. But that's not bechavod. Why? The Rambam explains why this is so important. Why can't you ask the Israel for the truma? Why can't you grab it or help yourself to it? Why isn't it self-service? Why don't the Israelis all go to Yerushalayim and hire a massive hall and all put their truma on the table and say, Kohanim, help yourselves? That's not the way it's done. It's not derech kavod. It has to be derech kavod. Why? She'al shulchan hamakom hem ochlin v'al shulchano hem shotim. Because they're not sitting at anybody's table. They're sitting at Hashem's table. And when you're sitting at Hashem's table, you behave as if you're sitting at the table of a king. You behave as if you're in a palace. And that's how the Kohanim have to behave. Umatnot elu laHashem hem v'hu zikar lahen. The truma is given from the farmer to Hashem, and Hashem invites the Kohanim to participate in the eating. They are invitees of Hashem. They are not recipients of the farmers. And it's important to understand that flow of Matnos Kahuna, most of the Matnos Kahuna in that particular format. Is that just for the Kohanim? So we've learned about two specific sets of people who eat at Hashem's table. Those who came out of Egypt eat at Hashem's table. High level of Kedusha, they get the Torah. Kohanim, when they get the gifts of Truma and so on, they're eating at Hashem's table. What about us? Do we not eat at Hashem's table? We don't get Truma, we don't eat Mon. What about us? Are we not invited? So the Zohar says a different Zohar in Parshas Miketz. Hu Parnash, it talks about a person, de mehemnuta de kudshebrichu, who really gets what it is to believe in Hashem. An individual who really lives with Hashem. Kagon Rabbi Yassa Saba, like Rabbi Yassa Saba. He was such a man. What did he do? How did it manifest? The Afa Gav the Havale Michla the Hau Yomel Mechal. Even though he'd already been to the supermarkets and he'd bought food for the day, it was all ready to be cooked, or maybe it was already cooked, ready for the meal. Lo have a matkin le, he wouldn't even prepare it, probably means it wasn't cooked. He wouldn't even start cooking it. Ad de sha'il mezone kame malka kadisha. Until he had asked Hashem for food. The food's there. You've bought it all. You're blessed. You've got money. You've acquired the food. It's all in the kitchen ready for cooking. And now all of a sudden you get onto your knees, metaphorically, and you say to the Rebbe, please, Rebbe, I need food. Can you help me? Why does he do that? After he's davened for food, the Sha'il Mezonah, and he's asked Hashem, please, Rebbe, can I sit at your table? Please, Rebbe, can I have some of your food? The Sha'il Mezonah Kami Malka, in front of the king, he asks for food. Kedein havi matkin. Then he would prepare the food. And then he would serve the food. I will never prepare my food until Hashem has given it to me. So he reminds himself every single day of the fact this food comes from Hashem. And so we see now, we've got three categories. We've got the Ochlei Haman, the people who came out of Egypt, they eat from Hashem's table. We've got the Kohanim, they eat from Hashem's table. And us? we can make that choice. You want to eat at your own table, eat at your own table. If you want to eat at Hashem's table, then do it the way Rabbi Yasser Saba used to do it. And we have that capability too. So that we can live our lives like the Ochlei Haman. It's true that from a physical perspective, what we're eating is not more. And all we can do about that is try and eat as healthily as we're able to and as naturally as we're able to. But we certainly can create the environment of eating and engaging with the world, where we engage with the world as guests in Hashem's palace, not as balabatim, not as people who walk around as if we own the place. We don't own the place. We're guests. And if we live as guests, the capacity to heal is much greater. The problem with, I don't want to say disease, because I don't want to talk about things that are absolutely clinical and one can't do anything about. Of course, there are those things as well, but I'm sure so much of illness, both mental and physiological, so much of illness is the resistance we put up to things. The expectation that we have how things should be and aren't, what we should have and don't have. We drive ourselves to such stress and worry about the believing that we're the balabatim and we're not getting what we're entitled to. If you treat yourself as a gift, you're on permanent vacation. I once had when we were in the jewelry business, I had a supplier who used to come from Germany twice or three times a year, and he used to meet me, a lovely man, and we would do some business together, and he would often he would print out his year's calendar and show me where he traveled around the world and where he was and when he would next be in our part of the world and if we could meet up at any other time. So he would take the calendar out and we'd look, and I once said to him, but there's no vacation on your calendar. Every single week you're on business somewhere else. He said, why would I want vacation? My life is vacation. I love what I do. This is vacation. What could be better than this? When you're on vacation, you're healthy. When on your vacation, you're not worried because you're on vacation. Why not be on vacation all the time? Why not be on the Pesach program all the time? The Rebbeinu Shalom is your host. He's entertaining you. He's providing for you. What are you killing yourself over being the balabos? You're not the balabos. I'm sure that nobody's on a Pesach program thinking to themselves, I wish I was arranging this. I wish I was the balabos here. I don't think anybody envies the balabos at a Pesach program or any other such program. You're very happy to be a guest. Yes, it costs you some money. The money's been paid already. Now you can relax. Nothing to worry about. Our whole lives can be like that. If we just are willing to see ourselves as guests and not as owners. And we have the obligations of a guest and responsibilities of a guest, and we have the pleasures of a guest. But we don't have to worry about things to the same degree. So this idea of the healing nature of Mon is not just about the purity of the food, it's also about the purity of experience when you give over, when you surrender your ownership of your existence to the real Balabos, to the real master of the universe, to the Rebbeinu Shalom himself. And that enables the healing to progress. So that is the one journey that we've got to look at. How do we let go of our insistence on ownership and understand that we are in this world as guests and readjust from a work life to a life of leisure? Now, the life of leisure doesn't mean you're not doing anything, but you're driven from an internal desire to do what is right. Even when what is right is to work, even when what is right is to earn, even when what is right is to produce and build a business, but you're driven by it being the right thing to do rather than I have to do it because I'm entitled to it, because I'm responsible to it, and so on. So I think there's a lot of interesting conversation around the healing process of shifting our perspective from one of ownership to one of hospitality, of a beneficiary of hospitality, with the Rebbeinu Shalom as our host. Who better could we have for a host than that? The second journey is the journey that we're on at the moment, from Pesach to Shavuot. That's also a journey. It's a journey in time. The first one was a journey in place as well. We're journeying from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai. But we still journey. Each year we journey. It's a journey in time. It's a journey from Yetziat Mitzrayim to Matan Torah. Coming out of Egypt, one type of individual and one type of nation, and coming to Har Sinai and leaving Har Sinai as a nation who's received the Torah, a completely different nation. But to get from the one to the other required a journey. It's also a journey from Heirut to Charut. Those are two closely associated words, and we'll analyze it in a moment. Heirut means freedom, and Charut means engraved, embedded in. The posuk that this is based on is V'haluchot ma'aseh Elokim heima. The tablets were creations of Hashem. V'hamichtav michtav Elokim, and the writing was the writing of Hashem. We're talking about the first tablets. Charut al haluchot, engraved into the stone. And in Pirkei Avos, in Perek Vav, we have this statement on that very posuk. Al tikra charut ela heirut. Don't read the word charut, which means engraved. Read the word charut. The words were free on the stone. It's hard to imagine two more opposite concepts than engraved into the stone. How often do we say it's not cast in concrete? What do you mean by that? We're free to make changes. But if it is cast in concrete, you're not free to make changes. So what does it mean? Al tikra charut ela heirut. Don't say engraved, say free. The exact opposite. She'en lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'talmud Torah. Because the only truly free person is somebody who engages with the Torah. This sounds a little bit like a sales spiel. It doesn't sound genuine. The only free person is somebody who engages in the Torah. So come everybody, buy some Torah, sign up for a Torah program, because that's the only free person. Freedom means Torah. What does it really mean? This isn't a slogan. This is a piece of Torah that means something very, very deep. And here's what we need to understand, and that is that when it comes to freedom, the body and the soul have an inverse relationship to freedom. What the body finds free, the soul finds enslaving. What the soul finds free, the body finds enslaving. And that's perhaps the biggest tension of life. That there's no more bigger tension than life, that is resolved ultimately only with death. When finally the soul says, look, enough of this. I'm out of here. Do your own thing. I'm out of here. The battle's over. But until that time, that is the struggle. It's not just a struggle between the Neshama and Guf. The struggle is freedom. Whenever you do something to liberate yourself, I'm enslaved. And whenever I do something to liberate myself, you're enslaved. What kind of relationship is this? So if you think about it, this idea I saw it in a little clip the other day, but it's so obvious. You don't need a clip for it. Think of social conservatism and social progressivism. So I'm not talking about politically. I'm just talking about it in the olden days when people were socially conservative. Generally, take the United States, but the same is true in England and probably most of Europe. And even today, there are a lot of conservative people who raise their children on faith, who raise their children with values, who believe in old-fashioned values. There are a lot of people who are socially conservative. And there are people who are progressive and not so. What conservatism directs is behavior. It doesn't direct thought. It doesn't tell you. Well, those old-fashioned parents didn't tell their children what to think. They told their children what to do. And if the children didn't do what they told, they got a patch. They got into trouble for that. They had to do what they were told and not do what they were told not to do. But the parents didn't teach them what you're allowed to think and what you're not allowed to think. Progressives are the opposite. Do what you want. Be free. But think like us. You've got to have the same values as us. And if you don't, we cancel you. And I'm not even talking about the formal cancel movement that we saw. The formal cancel movement was the kind of absurd conclusion of a whole process that had been taking place and still takes place of social censorship, where you just can't say certain things in public, you can't even believe certain things in public because you'll be totally ostracized. And so you see, when you analyze and you unpack it, you realize it's not just two groups of people, the conservatives and the progressive people. It's actually part of the nature of existence. You can't be free in both thought and action. You've got to choose which one is going to be free. Because if you're told how to behave, or if you're told that you can behave any way you want, then you're chaotic. So then you've got to be structured in your belief system. Your belief system has to be very structured. If you're told that you can be free in your belief system, then your behavior will be out of sync. You won't know how to behave. So you have to have at least one of them has to be structured. If both of them are structured, you're a prisoner. If you're told what to think and how to behave, you're in communist Russia. There you were governed, your actions were governed, and your thought was governed. That's what communism was. That's what a lot of socialism is. But if you're just told there are certain behaviors that are expected, this is how you behave, you do this, you don't do that, then you're free to think. You can think what you want. It doesn't really matter. And in Torah, that's so important, because in Torah you've got the Shulchan Aruch, in a sense, are the guardrails of behavior. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't spend a lot of time telling you what to think. The Shulchan Aruch tells you what to do and what not to do. The Gemara is a propeller of innovative thinking. And that's why you need both of them. You need to learn halakha because that sets the behavioral guardrails. But if you don't learn Gemara at the same time in an innovative way, and I'm not suggesting that every single person has to learn Gemara the same way. There are many, many different ways to learn Gemara. I had a friend who told me recently that if he were teaching people who haven't had no background in Gemara before, he would teach Haggadah, he would teach the narrative parts of the Gemara, so as to draw people into the conversations and the discussions of Gemara. You don't have to start off learning Shnaim Ochzim or Mafkid. You don't have to start learning the complicated things. Each person in their own way, there's so much in the Gemara. Those of you listening to the Matmonim see that even in each Matmon, if you don't understand this part of it, but this part of it will be meaningful, or that part, and that's only one line on the page. There's so much there. You need the freedom of expression that Gemara allows, together with the restrictions of behavior that the Shulchan Aruch imposes. And the more restrictions, and the secular people begin to understand this. You've got a lot of people, you've got people in the tech world who wear these uniforms. They were very against the uniforms that the corporate world used to wear, so they made their own uniforms. A black T-shirt and black jeans or whatever it is, and that becomes a uniform. And Mark Zuckerberg says it just cuts out the need for decision-making in the morning. At least one decision's out of the way. I know what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing the same as I wore yesterday, same as I'm going to wear tomorrow. Like a yeshiva bocher. White shirt, black trousers, black thing, black. That's what I'm wearing. And if a yeshiva bocher does it, everybody says, oh, they're just, they're charedim, they're all boring. They all wear the same thing because they're brainwashed. No, they wear the same thing so that they're not brainwashed. And I'm not saying that applies throughout the yeshiva world. I'm just saying it doesn't mean because somebody is restrictive and disciplined in the way they act that they're not disciplined that they're not free in the way they think. And that's the beauty of the Gemara. The Gemara questions everything. All the halachot, which are so rigid, the Gemara questions from first principles. Where does this come from? Who even says so? How do you know that it is so? But so-and-so said something different. What about him? And so it goes on and on. It's not like a Shulchan Aruch. A Shulchan Aruch, if you take the Ramah out of the Shulchan Aruch, it's just law, one after the other. And an occasional Yeshomrim. There's a second view, some might say. And the Ramah brings in a third dimension. And then the Nosei bring in other things into the Shulchan Aruch. But essentially, the Shulchan Aruch is not a debate. It's not a conversation. It's not a discussion. It's just the guardrails of behavior. This is what you do. The more you are structured in your action, the more freedom you've got in your thought. I can think what I want. I can go where I want with my mind because it's not going to affect my behavior. The thought that what I think I have to do makes thinking very restrictive. Isn't that what Naaseh v'Nishma means? Naaseh, give us the rules, we'll follow them. Then Nishma, now we can start thinking. Because we know the rules. I don't have to make up the rules. I don't have to work out the rules. And am I in alignment or am I not in alignment? Forget it. The rules are there. I'm committed to the rules. Now that I'm committed to the rules, I'm free to explore. I'm free to think. Because ultimately my conclusions have to come back to the way I live. Otherwise I'll be completely out of alignment with my life and my thoughts will be out of alignment. So ultimately they're going to align. That's what the mind does. Ultimately the mind comes back and explains the way you live. Otherwise we live in such dissonance we can't take it. So if the structure of our lives is a God-given structure and we commit to that, and then Hashem says, now Ask what you want, think what you want, go where you want with your mind. Nishma. You know the laws. Nishma doesn't mean I'm going to learn halakha. You know halakha because you've already said naaseh. So nishma is after you've learnt Shulchan Aruch, you know the law, and you're practicing the law. Now nishma. Now I'm free to think. That's what a Jewish mind is. I'm free to think because I'm not free to choose how I act. How I act is determined by the Torah. How I think, that's determined by me. I can think whatever I want. And that freedom is so important as we talk about the cherut and the charut. The behaviors are charut. The behaviors are engraved. They're embedded. They're part of our DNA. We've been doing them for millennia already. It's just, that's how it is. A medrash in Vayikra Rabbah. Omar David Ribono Shel Olam. David says to Hashem, B'chol yom v'yom hayiti mechashev v'omer lemakom ploni u'lebeit dira ploni ani holech. Every day I get up with a to-do list. I've got a whole lot of things to do. I've got to go to this office. I've got to speak to this person. I've got to call that one. I've got to send this email. I've got to attend this conference. I've got a whole to-do list, and my calendar is full. And as I get going, a funny thing happens. And after a few minutes, I look around me, and I'm in the yeshiva. I'm in the Beis HaMidrash. That's where I land. I don't know how it happens. I just keep on landing up there. He's programmed. He's programmed to learn Torah. And he's saying, my thought, I'm thinking all sorts of other things. I'm free to think what I want. But when it comes to living, I live the way I'm programmed. And there's nothing wrong with being programmed by the Torah. There's something wrong in being programmed by another human being. But there's nothing wrong in being programmed by the Torah, provided that programming unlocks your intellectual and spiritual freedom. If the programming keeps your thinking locked, then you're a prisoner. But if the programming unlocks the thinking, because the guf and the neshama are in non-reciprocal relationship, so that as my body, my actions are governed more and more by the laws of the Torah, and I don't have to think, what do I do? Am I allowed to? Am I not? I just know what to do. I've been raised that way. My parents were raised that way. My grandparents were raised. I don't have to think about the do's and don'ts of everyday life. Occasionally there's a shaila, and I've got to deal with a shaila, but that's occasional. Generally, I know my life is routine. Much easier that way to have the cherut of the mind. And so that journey is one from cherut, from being physically free to being physically governed. It's a journey from being mentally governed to being mentally free. We think we're mentally free, but you just start talking to somebody and it takes a few minutes and you know exactly what they're going to say about anything because they fit into one of a few groups and we conform and we say the same things that the other people in that group say. And the more the media feed us with the stuff that our little bubble wants to hear or they want us to hear, the more we're governed in our thinking. That's the crime that's happening today. We're being told, you're free to do whatever we want. You can travel wherever you want. You can go where you want. You can study what you want. You can practice. Do what you want. But thinking, Google will control. Thinking, YouTube will control. Thinking is going to be controlled not by you. And that's what we've got to resist. That's the journey. To say, I'm willing to give up my physical freedom because the physical freedom is not useful to me. What I need in its place is mental and spiritual freedom. And that's that process of movement. And that process of movement started already 2 weeks ago at the Seder night. This is the piece that my son Moshe gave some Divrei Torah on this, shiurim on this, and it opened up a whole area of thinking. If you think of the four sons, that in itself is a journey. That you start with a she'en yodea lisho. He doesn't, you've got no questions. Everything's fine. Everything is okay. And then there's progress. You progress to the level of a tam, which we'll see the Yerushalmi calls a tipesh. Tam, I know people say tam means the perfect guy, the guy who just believes in Hashem, doesn't question other. Yerushalmi says tam means an idiot. So you move from ignorant to stupid. That's a journey. Now from stupid you start becoming one of two things. Now you're beginning to ask. You're no longer sheni yedei, so you're asking, mazot, what's going on? And you're learning. You're learning facts. And now you want to give meaning to the facts that you learned. You're told how to behave. You're learning Shulchan Aruch. You're told how to behave. Now you want to give meaning to how you behave. Now there's an option. There's a fork in the road. You can go the Rasha's way, and you can go the Chacham's way. And if you look at the Yerushalmi says so beautifully, so interestingly, what does the Chacham say? What are all these different laws which Hashem commanded us? So yes, I've learned the Shulchan Aruch, and now I'm giving meaning to it. The meaning I'm giving into it, it's divine. It comes from Hashem. That's the Chacham. What about the Rasha? Ben Rasha Ma'omer, Ma Avodah Azot Lachem, explains the Yerushalmi, Ma HaTorah Chazeh She'atem Matrichim Aleinu B'chol Shana V'Shana. You rabbis, what are you imposing all these rules on us? Ever heard that before? That's the Rosh. You rabbis. This is not about Hashem's law. The rabbis have made this all up. Have you heard that before? All the rabbis, I don't mind the Torah's laws, but this is all rabbinic laws. The rabbis are making things difficult for us. All this business with kidneys, this is the rabbis imposing all this hardship on us. Why are you imposing all this hardship on us? Make it easy for us. And on that, the Korban Ha'eda, which is one of the important perushim on the Yerushalmi, says, Ki'ilu lo nitnu ha'mitzvot ela liyagea b'nei adam, as if the mitzvahs were given just to drain us, to tire us. That's a Rasha because the truth is the mitzvahs were given for our good. So the question is, how do you look at mitzvahs? That's what differentiates a Rasha and a Tzaddik. If I were to say to you, a Rasha and a Chacham, if I were to say to you, what's the difference between a wicked man and a Chacham? You might say one's observant, one isn't. No, they're both observant. The difference is one sees it as difficulty, as a load to carry. Schwer zu sein a Yid. It's difficult to be a Jewish person. That's the Rosh. And the Chacham is, this comes from the emotion. I just want to understand it. I want to learn. I want to explore. I want to question. I want to get into it. I want to immerse myself in it. Instead of standing off and saying, what are you imposing on me? The difference is perspective. The difference is not in action. The difference is perspective. They both keep the mitzvahs. That's not what it's about. One keeps the mitzvahs and explores their meaning. One keeps the mitzvahs and feels troubled and overburdened by it. And that's part of that journey that we need to take. To understand the relationship between the charut, the embeddedness of practice, which needs to be routine, which needs to be disciplined, and the cherut of the mind, the freedom of the mind to explore, provided the halachic guidelines are fully adhered to. It's interesting that Moshe Feinstein apparently said that one of the things, Rabbi Goldfein, I think, told this to my son, that one of the things he found difficult in the United States, dealing with religious people in the United States, was they found Torah, it was a burden. So, you had your life and your freedom and your sports and your entertainment, and then there's this Torah stuff you've got to do as well. And he just couldn't adjust to it. He couldn't relate to that. And one gets perhaps a better idea of it. There's a beautiful article written by Rav Chaim Navon in the Mekor Rishon this last weekend about Rabbi Lichtenstein, whose Yortzeit it was. And he tells the story. It was in 1996. There was a big snowstorm in Yerushalayim, in the area of Yerushalayim. And he used to live in Yerushalayim and used to teach in Alon Shvut. And the road was not an easy road. So there were these snowstorms, and he was getting terribly frustrated that he couldn't get to the yeshiva to give his shir, and he was trying to find all sorts of different ways of doing that. And his Rebbetzin said to him, you know what, your life is more important than your work. At the end of the day, calm down, relax. I know you've got a job to do, but your life is more important. You're not going on the roads today. And a little while later he came to her when he calmed down, and he said, you don't get it. This is not my work. This is my life. That's Ki Heim Chayenu V'Orech Yameinu. We say it every night in Ma'ariv, but we just don't mean it. We don't get it. Ki Heim Chayenu. Our life is our learning of Torah. Our life is our living of Torah. Our life is our thinking in Torah. Everything else is a distraction. That's our life. It's not we have a life and we have Torah. You've got a life and you go to a shir. You've got a life and you learn the daf. You've got a life and you daven 3 times a day. No, that's your life. And to get ourselves, that's the journey. The journey is to get to that place. To get that place where Torah is no longer, God forbid, as the Rasha says, Ma ha-Torah hazatircha azu. What is this trouble you're giving us, this burden? Be honest with ourselves. Do we really see it as the joy of life? Do we see our religious observance? Do we see our Torah life as the joy of our lives, of the essence of our being, of the source of all of our vitality? Or do we see it as a bit of a distraction to something you've got to do? You've got to cross the X's. I was listening to a shir, a lovely person, a wonderful rabbi. I just happened to be listening at the back. He was giving a daf yomi shir. You cannot imagine how boring. And it is boring beyond. And 25, 30 people sitting there from beginning to end. And I'm just full of admiration to them. I couldn't have lasted for 5 minutes, would have been like a lifetime. I couldn't have done it. They sit, every day they sit and they listen, and he's a wonderful man who's doing his best and he's teaching, and they're wonderful people and they're doing their best and they're learning. But is that a tircha or is that really a joy? I was looking at their faces. It wasn't. They weren't having fun. It was just self-discipline. That's what a religious Jew does. You do the daf. Everybody's doing the daf. I got to do the daf too. And you know what? After 7 years, I can say I finished Shas. And that's what a Jew does. I went through it. It was awful, but I did it. I made it. It's like running. Some people find running joyful. There's some people I know who don't find it joyful. They force themselves to do it because they know it's good for them. Is this forcing ourselves to do it because we know it's good for us, which is a great thing? At least it's something. It's very great. I don't want to trivialize that. But the journey is to go beyond that. The journey is to get to a point where you're actually having fun, where you're actually enjoying it. And that's where we need to get, because if we can get there, then we're on the journey to healing. And again, there are two parts to the healing. The one part for the healing is getting to the point where we give up ownership and we embrace being a guest in the world. And the other part of healing is giving up seeing the Torah as this tircha, as this trouble, this discipline we've got to observe because it's given to us and that's our destiny, and to be able to move beyond that. I'm not saying don't do that, that's the starting point. But let's go beyond that, because that's the journey. A journey means you don't stay where you are. That's what a journey is. A journey is not you say, I'm going on a journey to wherever, and after a couple of hours of journeying, you say, well, that's enough. I'm just going to stay here. That's not a journey anymore. Then you're starting to live there. The journey's over. Once you stop, the journey's over. And we've got to ask ourselves, have I stopped or am I journeying? If I'm stopped, let me be honest. I've finished journeying. My life is done. I'm done. I'm done. Whatever I'm doing at the moment, that's it. I'll carry on doing things, but I'm not going to evolve as a human being. My journey is over. Or am I a journeyer? Am I an adventurer? Am I an explorer? And if I am, I have two journeys to engage in. The one is the journey to freedom, and the other is the journey to, well, they're both journeys to freedom, isn't there? One is journey to healing, to give up, to let go of the burden of ownership and embrace the joy of and leisure of being a guest, and to give up the burden of Torah and to embrace the Torah not as a burden, but as something that is so inherent to who I am that it's part of my vitality and part of my joy. And so as we do deal with Yom HaZikaron, Yom Ha'aztmaut, once again, Yom HaZikaron is that which we need to heal from. Yom Ha'aztmaut represents the freedom we hope we will one day have. At the moment, we don't yet have that level of freedom, but we're journeying. This is a journey. The journey is from all the hardship that has brought us to this point, starting long before 1948. All of the historic hardship that's brought us to this point is part of a journey, and the journey is not over. Eretz Yisrael, and some of the people who object to making too much of a Yom Tov of Yom Ha'aztmaut, part of their reasoning is the journey is not over. What are you celebrating having arrived? We haven't arrived yet. It's not an arrival party. We're still on the journey. And there are different views, and I'm not getting involved in that, but to understand we are still on a journey, and that together we should continue the journey and find a greater pleasure in a uniformity of being, in a rigidness, somewhat of a rigidness of being, so that is the important part, we can enjoy the freedom and the liberty of thinking and exploring with our minds and our souls, so as to achieve a true movement from charut to cherut, from being engraved in our minds to being free in our minds, because we're no longer free in our actions, we're engraved in our actions. So I hope that leads us all to a wonderful Shavuot, and that we continue learning together and exploring together.